Hiya, folks. That was a little snippet of a song called Between the Eyes, and it comes originally from an album called Lemming Mania by Amon-Düül 2. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Amon-Düül 2. When I was in Germany this past, I guess I was there about a week ago, I got into Amon-Düül, which is a German krautrock. I guess a lot of people don't like the term krautrock because it's slightly insulting. But it's a German experimental hard rock band from the early 70s. And I got really into them, especially that song, which I love. And somebody's already left me a snarky comment on the video saying, you should learn how to play your instrument. You sound like a 12-year-old playing in his basement. The interesting thing about that song, for you music nerds, is that the ending part is all over an A major chord, but the guitar solo that the original guitarist plays, I'm not sure his name, is in the key of E. So everything sounds wrong, and I also played it like that, so that may account for why the guy thought I couldn't play. But anyway, I love that song, and I think it's the greatest King Crimson song that King Crimson never wrote. And I don't know if that's deliberate or not. But I tried to make my version sound even more like King Crimson. So, I thought I would respond to another somewhat less snarky comment that was left on a recent video of mine. Actually, it was left recently on an old video of mine. I see these comments come up because I get notifications for them, but sometimes they're on videos that are years old. And I'm not sure how old this video was that the person was commenting on. But apparently in the video I had quoted the pamphlet Understanding Shobo Genzo by Gudo Nishijima Roshi, my teacher, in which he was comparing Western philosophy and Western philosophical concepts to what Dogen talks about. And this guy who commented took exception to that and thought I didn't know anything about Western philosophy and I should learn the Western philosophy and blah, 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 and how great it was, and I don't know anything, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, I will admit that I am not well-versed in Western philosophy. It's never been a big interest of mine. Well, I won't say never. It was only briefly a big interest of mine, and I'll tell you why, what the story is behind that. Is when I think my second or third semester at Kent State University, I switched my major a bunch of times, and I decided to be a philosophy major, and that lasted a semester. And I decided to become a philosophy major because I was really interested in the meaning of life. What is it all about? What is this thing that I am living through? What is this person that I am? What's the deal here? And I thought, well, philosophy, that's the people who study this stuff. So I took the basic courses that one takes for your first semester as a philosophy major. And I was majorly, see what I did there? I was majorly disappointed because it didn't seem to be anything about my life. It seemed to be a lot of brain farts. You know, this is me with how many decades of hindsight, but I probably would have expressed it in somewhat similar way when I was 19 or 20 years old. It just seemed to be nothing. There seemed to be nothing there. And I couldn't at the time quite put my finger on why it seemed that way. But I think after all these years I can, and that's what I wanted to try to make this video about. Okay, so the commenter, though, was responding to a quote from Nishijima Roshi. Now, Nishijima Roshi did know his stuff when it came to Western philosophy. He was really interested in it. He was super, super interested in Western philosophy. He was particularly fond of Immanuel Kant. I remember him quoting Immanuel Kant a lot because in Japanese, when you're pronouncing, when somebody has a Japanese accent, the word Kant sounds a little obscene. So I often heard him say the Immanuel Kant's name with a rather obscene sounding pronunciation. And he was also fond of, I believe, Heidegger. Sorry, I had to stop recording the video because I just wasn't sure. Yes, it was Heidegger who he was really interested in, the guy who wrote Zeit und Sein, Being and Time, because, of course, Dogen wrote a famous essay called Uji, which is translated as pretty much the same thing, being time. And Nishijima Roshi was so interested in Heidegger that he actually learned German, or learned enough German that he could read Heidegger in the original, because he wanted to get the closest to the source of Heidegger. And he also liked a lot of the German existentialist philosophers and stuff. So his bookshelf was full of stuff by these guys, often in foreign languages that he taught himself to read, like English and German. So I don't know exactly the quote the guy was responding to, but the quote he was responding to was a quote from a guy who did know his stuff about Western philosophy. And what he was saying about Western philosophy came from a lot of reading and a lot of study of Western philosophy. And I just read something recently. I wish I could tell you where I read this, but somebody was pointing out, and I guess this is a kind of a scandal these days, that people thought Heidegger came up with that idea of Zeit und Sein, being and time, independently of any Eastern philosophy and Buddhism. And he presented it that way, but it's come out recently that Heidegger probably got that from Dogen. Well, maybe not exactly from Dogen, but he had apparently had access to some early translations of some Buddhist philosophies in which it talked about that idea of being in time, and then he presented it as if it was his own idea. So there you go with Heidegger. But sorry, that's just a little aside. The difference between Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy, and the reason that I got into Buddhism after kind of spending, how long is a semester? 3 or 4 months? I don't know. Yeah, something like that. After spending that much time studying Western philosophy and kind of feeling like, this isn't for me, the difference, which I could feel at the time, but probably couldn't articulate, is the meditation practice. That's really where the line comes in. And that's what makes a huge difference between these two ways of doing philosophy. So all of Western philosophy, well, I won't say all 100%, but I would say the vast majority, like the vast majority of Western philosophy is based on thought. Okay, these philosophers sit around thinking about whatever their life and the universe and everything, and they come up with ideas, and maybe they read other people's ideas and they kind of put it together, and thought puts together a picture of the world, a philosophy of the world based on how they've thought of it. And often these kinds of thought-based philosophies can be really useful. Some of them are more useful than others, but they can be really useful, and we can learn a lot from that. But it's always based on thought. The difference when it comes to Buddhism and often Hindu philosophies and some of these other philosophies is that what's being presented to you when you read Dogen, so let's just, let's take Dogen for an example, is not based on thought. Of course, thought goes into it. Dogen is thinking about how to express these ideas, and we know that he rewrote many of his essays, sometimes a lot, we don't know how many times for some of them, but they seem to have been rewritten over the period of decades, some of them like Genjo Koan. So he was obviously thinking about it. So thinking was part of the process. But at the basis, what he's doing is he's not trying to describe his thoughts to you. He's trying to use thought to describe his experience. And his experience is his experience doing zazen, his experience doing meditation, which he did a lot of. And people who haven't done a lot of meditation are often kind of dismissive about it because they imagine, I think a lot of people who are into Western philosophy, I'm sorry if I'm mischaracterizing you out there if you're one of these people, but I get the impression a lot of people who are into Western philosophy, when they imagine what meditation is, they imagine that meditation is kind of like sitting around thinking about things, because we often use the word meditation that way in English. We say, I'm going to meditate on this problem, which means I'm going to think about this problem. But that's not what's going on in Zazen. In Zazen, you're actually allowing reality to present itself to you. And if you haven't had much experience with Zazen, you're going to feel like probably that it doesn't present much at all to you, because that's really what it feels like at the beginning. But if you spend years and years of doing this, like Dogen did, reality starts to present a lot to you. And you discover that there is a lot in your internal thing that doesn't have anything to do with thought. And one of the things one often discovers is this is metaphorical, and thought always does this, but here we go. You're able to see thought from the outside. You're able to kind of see what thought is from beyond thought, which is impossible to do from within thought. You can't think of what thought is. You can think about thought a lot, and I know that a lot of Western philosophy is dedicated to this, but it's not the same as getting a perspective on thought from outside of thought. And once you've had the perspective on thought from outside of thought, the idea that thought, any kind of thought, even the best thought, could ever present you with what reality actually is, just seems laughable. Because that was one of the things that was one of the first sort of, I don't know if you'd call these Kensho experiences, these sort of mini Kensho experiences that I had early-ish in my practice, or by early-ish in my practice, I mean after 10 or 15 years of something, of doing Zazen every day. I came to understand that my thoughts are just thoughts. And I know anybody could say that, but that came from the perspective of looking at thought from outside of thought. And when you look at thought from outside of thought, you can just go, oh, that's what it is. It's an amazing revelation. And when you get there, it's impossible from that moment on to take thought nearly as seriously as you did before. You can get caught up in it, and I get caught up in it myself, and it happens. And we all slip up, even the best people who are into this slip up from time to time. It's the temptations of Mara that Buddha talked about. But it's impossible to take it as seriously as you once did. It just is impossible. I just can't do it. Even in my darkest moments, gloomy, thought-filled moments when things seem really bad, even then, there's a little part of me that remembers the experience of seeing thought from outside of thought. And then I'm going, oh, yeah, I can't really take that very seriously, because it's just this bubbling information thing that's going on in your head. The best analogy that I came across was Kosho Uchiyama, who compared thought to the action of your stomach. Like, your stomach produces digestive juices and stuff to digest whatever you've eaten, and it just does that. And the same thing happens with your brain. It produces energy and whatever to try to analyze your experience of the day. But it's really a similar sort of process. It's just kind of this thing that the body does with what things are given it. In the terms of the brain, information is what it's given, and it's manipulating information the same way as your stomach is manipulating the Cheetos that you ate, or whatever it is that you just ate. And if you put a lot of Cheeto level stuff in your brain, if you've looked at a lot of Twitter and Facebook nonsense, that's what your brain is going to be manipulating and coughing up, and it's just going to cough up, that stuff. That's all it is. So that's the difference between Eastern and Western philosophy. This is why I think Dogen is so much better, and pretty much any Buddhist philosopher is so much better. There are certain streams of Eastern philosophy, particularly when you get into Indian Buddhism in the sort of, I don't know what you call it, the late period of Indian Buddhism, just before it became destroyed by the invaders who came and destroyed Buddhism, the Muslim invaders. Let's just call it what it is. There was this period of Buddhist universities where people were really thinking about stuff and making huge books of their thoughts about Buddhism, and that stuff gets kind of twisty and turny, and it's not as valuable as something like Dogen. But even that stuff is at its base, it's based on the experience of meditation. At least most of it is. I'm sure some of it is done by people who'd never even meditated. That's the stuff that's not very worthwhile. But most of it's based on meditation, and that's the difference. And so this is why I like Dogen and Eastern philosophy better than Western philosophy. So there you go. There's your answer to that. I admit I'm not well versed in Western philosophy, but I'm just not interested in it. I'm just not interested in hearing somebody's deep thoughts. It just, I'm sorry. I know maybe some of you think I should be interested in it, but I'm just not. I just find it boring. I'd rather listen to Amun Düül too. This one's got a great cover. This is like a compilation from several of their albums, but I can't find any information on the internet about this album. It's like it doesn't even exist, but here it is. I bought it. So, there you go. If you want to support me doing what I do, you can go to the URL that you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are my main ways of making a living, and I really appreciate your support. But as I always say, you don't have to support me if you don't want to support me. All right, we will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye.
Hey, Zygmunt. How you doing? What did you think of Amun Düül 2? You got to hear that whole song a couple of times when I recorded it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it didn't disturb your sleep too much. All right, we'll see you later, Ziggy. Bye.